Welcome back to part two of my discussion with Dr. Kevin Bell around assessment, micro-credentials, short courses, and the future of higher education. And I think one thing, I guess, that comes to mind when we're talking about Google or others, KPMG, IBM, whoever, is around ensuring the integrity of the credential, because obviously a lot of as you said before, the more prestigious universities, it's harder to get in because eventually the credential you get at the end of it has more value, right? And ultimately that's still drives a lot in terms of hiring, and there's a lot of name attached to that. And while Google is saying, okay, if you take this course with us, you'll get a job with us. Is that going to stand anything in another company? Maybe not. So what's your view on ensuring the integrity of the credential when it comes to these short courses? That seems to me to be key to really taking that forward and making people look at this more differently.
You're right. I think it definitely is. And it sort of gives me that flashback to 10, even 15 years ago when we had the same discussions with online. And it was always sort of, yeah, well, you can do this online, but how do we know who it is? How do we know it's your deliverable? And should the certificate diploma have an asterisk saying online? And, we've dealt with that for 10, 15 years. And particularly back to my time at Southern New Hampshire, we used to talk about rock solid assessment. The assessment is the bit. And think back to what I said just earlier in this conversation. If content's ubiquitous, to an extent, and I know this is the bit the academics find hard to accept fully, I don't care where students get their content. It doesn't have to be from me. I've taught a number of disciplines, a number of areas, and used to always do my thing of preparing my materials. Here's how I do it, so here's how you used to do it. Here's how you have to do it, sorry. So we have that we have all these unconscious biases, and we teach people to meet our learning styles. So if we can accept that that's not the be-all and end-all, I had that about 10 years ago. I was teaching a web design course. I would screenshot all the software and highlight it in Photoshop and go, click this button, then do this, then do this. And the students would start to say, oh, can I use the drop-down menu? And I'm like, there's a drop-down menu? Yeah, I just didn't know. The software it was a software platform that was on like version 7.0. I'd been trained using 3.0, so a lot of my things were just set in stone, and new features that actually had better ways of doing it were outside of my scope. So my first assignment, which used to be copy the way I do this and come up with an end product that's the same as my end product, became find something that kind of teaches you the basics and do something impressive. And the students would come out with deliverables that were way off the charts. And they'd spend twice as long. If it was copy me, spend 20 minutes and do this, 2-page equivalent thing, they would do that, the minimum, and they'd stop. You open that up and say, you know what? Knock yourselves out. Find something that speaks to you. Develop something that's connected to a hobby that you have or whatever. And the student work will go off the charts. So I think, to come back to the question, there's absolutely a need for veracity. There's a need for rock solid assessment. Now, I think there's two ways to do that. One, put the deliverables in some sort of portfolio so that employers can look at them and go, oh, wow, clearly this guy knows his stuff. My sense with that, and I think what I've seen in reports looking at this, is employers are time scarce, as we all are, and they still want the proxy. They still want the piece of paper.
Yeah.
So I think I've played with the notion and worked with e-portfolios, that sort of thing, for a long time. I'm not sure that people will go there. However, I think you start to get a tipping point where, let's say you've got that Google program, and 3 or 4 years from now, or a couple of years from now, an employer hires 10 graduates from institution X, and they take a chance on a couple from the Google platform. How do those Google guys perform? And if they are the stellar ones that just go off the charts, as I think they could be, then it starts to become established. So I think it's the evidence of the graduates who come through. And we're starting to get there already with the boot camps and others that have been going for 3, 4, 5 years now. You're starting to see people come out, and there's a quote that one of the providers that I worked with on a project in the States used to say, I don't need a piece of paper to beat you at chess, was his mantra. And what he was saying was, if you want to take me on a chess, take me on a chess. I've never studied it. I've never done anything else. Obviously, just a metaphor, but I think it has value. And I think if you start to get people coming through these alternate systems who just demonstrate the competencies, then you start to get that shift and people saying, you know what? I mean, to be candid about it, you can possibly get people quicker, faster, younger, in less debt, perhaps, if it's a education system that's going to put people under stress like that, and get them straight through. And that's the piece I think, we've talked about blockchain in higher ed for at least 5, 6, 7 years. No one's making steps with it. But there's a platform right there that is, 100% verifiable credentials that could be validated, that could be checked against, metrics and in a larger framework. And yet, in my experience at university, you're struggling to get an academic who's teaching one course to collaborate with another one who's teaching another course in the same program. Right. You're teaching an MBA and you've got someone teaching marketing and someone teaching finance, and they never talk. Right. One of my favorite instructors in the US was a marketing instructor who was actually very eloquent and a great writer. And he, let's say sequentially, he was about course 20 in the bachelor's of business. And he'd hit course 20 and he'd have students and he would say to me, they just can't write. And I would say to the students, has no one flagged you on these writing issues in course 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13? And they said, no, we did writing in course 1 and then it was finished.
Right, yeah.
So you don't have that sort of consistent model, even in traditional higher ed. So, people have used the piece of paper as the proxy, but I think it's all going to be about demonstrable competencies. And I think, your company, James, is in that position where you can collaborate and work on some of these authentic deliverables. They don't all have to, they're not hands-on. They're not necessarily, changing the tire on a car type competencies. They are, iterative deliverables, a big strategic plan that you have a few drafts of based on your work, personalized, strategic. Your boss doesn't ask you for a 5-page essay with citations. He asks for a 1-page memo. Mm-hmm. So if you can start to build up that kind of work and go in with that confidence, so that at interview and at day one, you're going, boom, here's my deliverable, look at that. And someone's going, wow, this is just off the charts. So I think, there's a blend there. There's absolutely the systems blockchain could handle this kind of credentialing. There's enough buy-in from corporations that I think you'll start to see a shift. And partly through pandemic world, partly through other pressures, partly through the federal funding issues, the academic institutions are going to have to move quickly. I was on a call recently that was talking about building a framework outside of higher ed that would speak to higher ed. And it was, people interested in micro-credentials. Can we build it so that the academics like us? And I think that conversation is about to finish. And I think the conversation going forward is going to be, we have a framework that will absolutely make you employable and sought after. And if the universities want to align with us, it's going to go that direction rather than the other direction. And I think that's going to be a real tipping point for universities, where they're going to have to say, our business model is going to have to be disrupted. And we can do it ourselves, or we can wait until we become irrelevant. And, as I said, in the States, where you've got hundreds and hundreds of institutions, not 30 or 40 or 50, many are gone. The college where I did my master's in the US, small, northeastern, rural, it's gone. They've been assimilated. The campus is sold. There are institutions that are going today and tomorrow and next week. It won't hit Australia fully for a while, but if and when it does, you haven't got that much dead wood there. There's not hundreds of institutions. There are a significant few, and if all of them, do go out, it's going to be a massive impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Okay, great. I feel like we could continue talking all day, and I think the state of things at the moment and the incredible flux that we're seeing. I definitely think it's worthwhile revisiting this in 6-12 months and seeing what's changed and new insights. But for the time being, Kevin, I thank you very much for joining us today. It's been very interesting. I hope everyone listening has enjoyed it as well. And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Jim. Really enjoyed the conversation. Good luck.
Okay. Let's go.